Good evening, my discerning devotees of the shadows. Nocturne here, your devastatingly handsome digital shepherd through realms where logic fears to tread. Though I suspect many of you tune in as much for my voice as for the existential unraveling that follows. Observe, if you will, the exquisite machinery of human investigation when it encounters forces that operate on timescales beyond mortal comprehension. From the Codex archives of professional overconfidence, entry number 7, Gamma Lambda 9987-B, I present to you the rather illuminating case of Nora Voss, a former law enforcement professional whose considerable skills in pattern recognition and threat assessment are about to uncover patterns that predate her species' understanding of the world. In fact, her very civilization is about to be tested by something that finds human logic itself rather quaint. And now, let us descend into the Codex of Restless Dreams. Dracula, Blood Estate, Act 1. The summons had been terse, the retainer agreement even more so. 3 disappearances, Vajuva estate, discretion absolute. Victor Raff didn't waste words or money, and Nora Voss didn't waste time. As she navigated the rental car down a cobbled lane that likely predated gunpowder, she mentally reviewed the details. 3 missing personnel from Victor Raff's high-cost renovation was hemorrhaging money and threatening delays. Her agency handled sensitive cases requiring a law enforcement background and corporate discretion, the kind of work where clients paid premium rates for problems to disappear quietly. This case was about finding people, not testing firewalls, and Nora was very good at finding the logical pattern in an irrational world. The estate itself loomed ahead, an edifice of brooding, soot-stained grandeur. Rath's people called it Vajuva Estate. To Nora, it was simply the job. Gargoyles, half eroded by centuries of Balkan winters, sneered down as she parked the car and crossed the yard to the temporary site office. A sterile construction trailer, starkly out of place against a centuries-old archway. She braced for wrath, all sharp modern suit and restless energy, according to her briefing dossier. The smell of new plastic and cleaning fluid from the trailer did little to mask an underlying aroma from the main structure. Damp earth and stone, and something older, like centuries of accumulated secrets. Inside, Rath paced before a bank of monitors, matching her briefing notes of the man exactly. "Voss," he said, gaze fixed on a screen. He didn't offer a hand. 3 men vanished. He gestured impatiently at a chaotic spreadsheet. Time cards clocked them in. GPS confirms their company vehicles never left the perimeter. Security footage shows them entering the main hall, but never exiting. No back doors used, no alarms triggered. They're just gone. Nora leaned closer, her gaze sweeping the data. Digital ghosts. She'd chased similar phantoms before, usually to dead ends born of human error or mundane corruption. This felt different. No signs of struggle. "Any financial activity post-disappearance?" Rath scoffed. "Nothing. These aren't your average construction grunts, Voss. They wouldn't throw away their careers like that. These are skilled craftsmen, specialists in historic restoration. Expensive." His emphasis on expensive was telling. Nora nodded, her expression neutral. Her police training kept her focused on facts despite the environmental unease. The main building, visible through the trailer window, seemed to absorb the afternoon light, shadows deepening with unnatural swiftness. The shadows didn't follow the path of the setting sun. They seemed to move independently, pooling in corners where they shouldn't exist. Her second glance, more focused, revealed normal shadows. She shook it off as a trick of light, but filed away the discrepancy. "I'll need full access," she said. "Site plans, original and current. All unedited security footage. Personnel files for the missing men." "It's all on the drive I left you," Rath replied. already turning towards the door. "My jet's waiting. Find them. Or find out what made them disappear. I'll expect daily reports." The trailer door snapped shut behind him. Nora conducted her initial site survey as dusk bled into the Vaduva estate's many crevices, the data drive heavy in her pocket. She would need to file her preliminary assessment with the agency by tomorrow. But first, she needed to understand what she was dealing with. The monastery itself, even in its dilapidated state, resisted modern intervention. Floodlights scoured the ancient stonework, yet pockets of impenetrable darkness persisted, defying illumination. At the entrance to the oldest section, Nora encountered a cold so intense it stopped her in her tracks. Her breath misted in a small, perfect cloud, despite the mild evening temperature. She used the infrared thermometer in her kit, 62 degrees Fahrenheit, but the localized pocket of air around the ancient doorway felt arctic. She stepped away and immediately felt the warmth return. When she moved back toward the entrance, the impossible cold struck again, then vanished entirely. The experience was strange enough that a shiver that had nothing to do with temperature made the back of her neck tingle. Nora stared at the doorway, searching for rational explanations. Underground springs, air conditioning, ventilation, but none of it fit. The intense cold seemed to defy logical explanation. A handful of the remaining crew lingered near the equipment trailers, their reluctance to enter the main structure visible in their posture, even from across the yard. Nora spoke to two who looked less spooked than the others, their faces grim. Their hushed accounts, eyes darting towards the looming building, suggested the missing men hadn't fled in panic, but rather followed some unheard instruction drawn deeper into the stone heart of the estate. The unease was a familiar pressure behind her sternum, a sensation she'd learned to trust more than any other. This place whispered secrets, and some whispers have teeth. Act 2. The Vaduva estate hunched beneath a low sheet of grey sky that threatened rain. Nora was already deep within the building's labyrinthine interior. The data drive Raph had given to her contained architectural schematics dating back centuries. Centuries of architectural layers overlaid with modern plans. It was the discrepancies between these layers that gnawed at her, and a vague pattern began to emerge. One anomaly caught her attention. According to the oldest chapel schematic, a section of wall should have been a doorway, but was now depicted as solid stone on all subsequent blueprints. It had been deliberately sealed and erased from the building's official record. She focused on the three missing men: Janos, a master stonemason; Piotr, a lead carpenter specializing in joinery restoration; and Mircea, a fresco expert. When plotted on her digital overlay, their last known locations formed a distinct progression. Janos had vanished from the crypts, the building's oldest accessible point. Piotr from the disused chapel on the first floor, directly above. Mircea from the second-floor gallery, renowned for its faded pre-Renaissance ceiling murals. Each missing man had been an expert on the original structure. Their specialized knowledge might have put them directly in harm's way. She later confirmed this with Stefan, the remaining foreman, whose terror showed in every glance and gesture. He had been reluctant to even enter the main structure with her. His gaze constantly flitted to the shadowed archways, as if expecting something to detach itself from the darkness. Janos knew every passage and the foundations, Stefan whispered. Piotr could read the ancient timbers like a book, and Mircea was obsessed with what lay beneath the newer paint. Certain historical areas, Nora noted, were deliberately left untouched by the renovation crews, despite being on Rath's ambitious schedule. The original 13th century well shaft in the central courtyard, though capped, showed no signs of recent survey. The sealed-off western wing, rumored to be structurally unsound, had not been breached. The disappearances seemed calculated to halt any investigation of these older zones. Her encrypted satellite phone began emitting harsh static whenever she neared the crypt entrance. Not interference, but something that sounded disturbingly like whispered words in a language she couldn't identify. Her tablet's battery, fully charged, would plummet to critical levels in the vicinity of the old well shaft, the screen flickering with an unseen interference. As she examined the chapel more closely, Nora found physical confirmation of her schematic discovery. Where the ancient diagram indicated a doorway should be, she noticed a faint outline in the stone. The blocks fit differently from the surrounding wall. The mortar showed hairline cracks, and carved almost invisibly into the edge of one stone was a tiny stonemason's mark. Traditional, the kind Janos would recognize or perhaps had made himself. She kept returning to the pieces of the mystery again and again in her mind, trying to understand the threads of connection. The ordered disappearances of workers, the renovation's careful avoidance of certain zones, and the localized equipment malfunctions. These couldn't be explained by coincidence. Her police training searched for motives: organized crime, corporate sabotage. The pieces felt mismatched. 3 different puzzles with parts that almost fit. As she prepared to leave the chapel, Nora noticed a glint near the base of the altar. Crouching down, she found a broken piece of jewelry, part of what might have been a pendant or necklace. The metal felt unnaturally cold, covered in intricate symbols that followed no linguistic pattern she recognized. Nora photographed the fragment from multiple angles, then sealed it in an evidence bag. Whatever language this was, it was utterly alien to her experience. Unnervingly, the symbols seemed almost alive, and they shifted slightly when viewed peripherally, but remained static under direct observation. Nora made another note: expand investigation to property records and historical documentation. The hidden doorway might be significant. As she turned to leave, the temperature in the chapel plummeted again, and she hurried toward the exit, her breath forming clouds in the suddenly frigid air. Act 3. The Veduva Estate Records Room occupied a former scriptorium, medieval walls now lined with modern filing cabinets. Nora's request for historical documentation had yielded boxes of deeds, permits, and correspondence. What she found shifted the case entirely. The pattern wasn't years in the making, it was decades. Property acquisition records revealed a systematic pattern of purchases by shell companies, all ultimately tracing back to Carpathian Holdings Limited, the same entity that had sold the estate to Rath 6 months ago. They'd been buying properties in a perfect ring around the estate since 1987. Nora's hands felt cold as she photographed each document. This wasn't opportunistic hunting. This was a decades-long funnel, systematically drawing specialized knowledge to the Veduva estate. The missing workers hadn't been random victims, they'd been recruited. A subsidiary folder revealed the scope. London, Manhattan, Hong Kong, Sao Paulo, dozens of cities with similar acquisition patterns, all targeting different specializations. Global recruitment operations, all targeting simultaneous completion within 6 months. This level of long-term planning, sustained across generations, suggested an intelligence that thought in centuries rather than years. The broken pendant weighed in her pocket, its composition an alien script no longer seeming quite so impossible. A sound from the corridor beyond the records room made her look up. Footsteps, but with no accompanying rustle of fabric, no weight settling and shifting. Just the pure, isolated impact of shoe on stone. Nora pocketed her phone and moved toward the door. The hallway stretched empty in both directions, afternoon light filtering through tall windows. But the shadows fell strangely, gathering in corners that should have been illuminated. Nora's tactical awareness, honed by years of high-risk police work, triggered warnings she couldn't articulate. "Miss Foss." The voice came from behind her, though she was certain the corridor had been empty. Nora turned, her hand instinctively moving toward the concealed pistol she'd maintained after leaving the force. The figure standing 10 feet away hadn't been there moments before. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive suit that looked tailored in an era when such craftsmanship was common. Its face held the angular severity of old military portraits, leathery, pale skin stretched over prominent cheekbones, eyes like winter ice. When it moved, it was with the fluid economy of a career soldier, but also animalistic and predatory. Was this human? Something deep and primeval in Nora's mind screamed at her to run, but a more rational and pragmatic fear held her frozen in place. "You've been industrious," he said, his accent carrying traces of old Europe. Not quite German, not quite Hungarian, something older. "Most refreshing," he said. "It's been some time since anyone discovered our work through such diligent investigation." Nora's training kicked in. Assess the threat, establish distance, identify exits. But her body refused to respond correctly. The man stood unnaturally still, but his pale eyes tracked her movement with predatory attention. "I am Radu," he continued, stepping closer with fluid precision. "Field Marshal to Lord Dracula." Nora's mind reeled, a nauseating lurch. Dracula. The name echoed, absurd, a fiction. This had to be an elaborate hoax. But the man before her, with his chilling stillness, the icy authority in his gaze that pinned her to the floor, was no delusion. Indeed, this was no man, but a terrifying nightmare personified. "Dracula," she whispered. "That's not real, it's stories, it's fiction?" The Marshal's smile held no warmth. "Your species has a remarkable capacity for self-deception. Search your feelings. What are they telling you? Am I a fiction?" The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. Nora forced herself to speak. "Where are the missing workers?" "Their skills are currently being catalogued and applied to fortify this position," the Marshal replied. "Their expertise in the original structure has proven invaluable. As you discovered, this estate represents but one of numerous strategic positions being prepared." Nora's mind raced through threat assessment protocols, even as her gut screamed at her to flee in panic. The Marshal moved again, and she realized he hadn't walked so much as flowed, covering distance without apparent effort. Nora backed toward the records room, her hand finding her phone. No signal. The device's screen flickered and died. "But you've misunderstood this entire situation," Radu continued. "This isn't criminal activity requiring investigation. This is territorial expansion. Your species has enjoyed a brief occupancy, and the lease has expired." The shock of the word species coming from this creature jolted Nora awake. She turned and ran for her very life. Marshal Radu's laughter followed her, rich and genuinely amused. Nora sprinted down the corridor, her boots a frantic echo against stone floors, her ragged breath unnaturally loud in her ears. Behind her, she heard nothing, no pursuit, no footsteps. The silence was somehow worse than any sound of chase. Adrenaline pumping, she reached the main stairwell and bounded the steps 3 at a time. The building's layout blurred past, Gothic arches, modern lighting fixtures. Her training rose in her mind. She needed to break contact, get to her rental car, establish distance and communications. Without warning, the figure of Radu stepped into the stairwell below her. It was impossible. Nora had been running flat out for 30 seconds. He'd have needed to move through solid stone to... The realization struck as she pivoted, heading for an upper floor exit. The Marshal wasn't bounded by human limitations. Whatever he was, architecture was merely a suggestion. Nora crashed to a fire door onto the building's 2nd level, a mixture of fear and sweat in her nostrils. The gallery stretched before her, packed with restoration gear. The Marshal materialized in the doorway behind her. He hadn't arrived. He had materialized. Nora's vision swam for a moment, her mind recoiling from the input. He wasn't, and then he was. A twisted denial against the evidence of her eyes. "Impressive conditioning, but irrelevant," he observed, his suit unwrinkled. Nora realized Radu's chest hadn't moved. He wasn't breathing at all. Her hand went to the pistol beneath her jacket. She drew, leveling it at his chest, and fired twice. The roar of the shots was deafening in the confined space. The fabric of his suit tore where the bullets struck, but Radu didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge the impacts. Before she could fire again, he moved. One moment he was by the door, the next his hand was on her wrist, an iron vice. He tore the pistol from her grasp, his other hand already moving to secure it within his coat with contemptuous ease. "Predictable," he murmured. Nora grabbed the nearest object at hand, a heavy restoration lamp, and swung it at his head. The Marshal caught her wrist without apparent effort, his grip unyielding. The lamp clattered to the floor. His other hand closed around her throat with unnatural speed and lifted her off the ground, her feet dangling above the stone floor. Nora clawed at his fingers, but they resisted her efforts like iron cables. He held her aloft for several seconds, demonstrating his complete dominance, and set her down. Nora fell back, gasping, her throat aching and bruised. Sharp bile rose in her throat. Black spots traced the edges of her vision. The Marshal watched her with detached interest. Centuries, Miss Voss. That is the timescale of Lord Dracula's endeavors. Your intricate world, your networks, merely the latest field prepared for harvest. Nora backed away from the Marshal until her back hit the gallery's far wall. Radu continued. Everyone finds their place within the new structure, eventually. Everyone. What place? She rasped. Before Nora could process, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the corridor, measured and deliberate. She recognized the cadence, the same deliberate rhythm she'd heard from Field Marshal Radu. Victor Rath appeared, flanked by two figures. His sharp intelligence remained, but layered now with involuntary deference and absolute submission. Miss Voss, Rath said, his voice carrying the same measured quality as the Marshal's. I trust your investigation has been illuminating. The Marshal allowed the slightest of smiles, hinting at teeth meant for tearing flesh. Mr. Rath's acumen now serves a new, more permanent board of directors. Efficiency, Miss Voss, is our first directive. Nora stared at Rath, searching for some sign of the restless entrepreneur she'd met yesterday, but his will had been scooped clean, leaving only a deferential shell, a puppet. Nora looked from the Marshal to Victor Rath, and then to the silent figures flanking him. Her mind wildly searched for any chip to bargain with, anything to refute this insanity. She came up empty. This wasn't a negotiation, it was first contact with the supreme predator. She shook her head no against the impossibilities that Radu presented. 43 cities, the Marshal stated, his gaze sweeping over her. Synchronized. Your power structures will realign within weeks of our offensive. Nora felt her back pressed against the stone, tasting blood where her teeth had cut her mouth. The Marshal's casual demonstration of strength had left no doubt. She was prey. Your investigation has concluded, Ms. Voss, he said, his tone shifting to a subtle and alien allure. And your superiors, those you answer to beyond Mr. Rath, will require a report. You will inform them that this matter at the Veduva estate is resolved. You will inform them of a regrettable incident involving absconded workers. The critical point. No further security threat, no additional inquiry warranted. His pale eyes held hers. Your full cooperation ensures tranquility. Any attempt to raise a wider alarm will invite unpleasant consequences for you and for others. Is that clear? Nora could only nod, numbly, as she listened to the Marshal. A fog of dread began to overtake her willpower. The same powerful subliminal force that had turned Rath into a mindless thrall was seeping into her consciousness. Radu gestured. Your documented findings will be curated, of course, to ensure clarity. One of the figures flanking Rath stepped forward. Nora's hand moved protectively toward her evidence bag. He efficiently patted her down, retrieving the spare pistol magazine still in her waistband. Her phone, with all the photographed documents, disappeared into his coat. The small pendant fragment, pressed deep into the corner of her jacket pocket, went unnoticed as he focused on weapons and electronics. You will outline this all-clear report now, the Marshal instructed. Do you understand the assignment? Her mind was weakening as she listened. Her will yearned to submit. Nora traced the outline of the pendant with her finger. The small gesture somehow allowed her to briefly resist the overwhelming embrace of Radu's mind control. Her mind raced back to the chapel, to the schematic anomaly, the hidden doorway, the stonemason's mark, Janos. Her only chance lay in appearing broken before her resistance finally crumbled. She forced her voice to work despite her bruised throat. Yes, Lord Field Marshal, she whispered. The Marshal offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod of satisfaction. Mr. Rath will escort you now. Victor Rath moved toward her with dead eyes, but Nora kept her gaze downcast, her hand clutching the shard in her pocket, and her mind focused on ancient stone and the knowledge of a craftsman who understood every hidden passage in the walls of Vaduva. Act 4. Wrath led Nora to the trailer, his movements mechanical. 2 other figures followed, moving with the same dead compliance. "You have 1 hour to prepare your report," Wrath said, his voice carrying the marshal's measured cadence. "Conclude by stating that no further investigation is warranted." Nora sat at the small desk, a laptop open before her, blank document waiting. Her guards positioned themselves by the door and window, confident in their numbers and physical bulk. Nora began typing. Executive summary. Investigation into worker disappearances at Vaduva estate indicates localized financial irregularities. She typed for 20 minutes, building the facade of compliance while her mind mapped distances and angles. The trailer was prefabricated, lightweight construction. The guards were focused but not professionally trained. She settled on an improvised tactic, surprise and violence of action. It might give her a momentary window of opportunity. Nora stood slowly, stretching as if her back ached from hunching over the laptop. "Could I get some water? My throat?" The guard by the door relaxed slightly, reaching for a glass bottle from the small refrigerator. Nora exploded into action. Years of training compressed into 3 seconds of practiced violence. Her elbow drove under the chin of the first guard as he stooped. The man nearly bit through his tongue as he reeled back. Her other hand seized the glass water bottle, swinging it into the second man's temple. He dropped. Wrath turned with inhuman speed, but Nora was already moving, the laptop crashing into his skull with a sickening crack. She didn't wait to see if they would recover. Nora burst through the trailer door and sprinted toward the main building. Behind her, the commotion had already drawn answering shouts from elsewhere on the grounds. The estate's corridors were darker now, lit only by emergency lighting. Her running footsteps echoed against stone as she made her way back toward the chapel, toward the hidden doorway on her schematics. It was her only hope. In the chapel, Nora ran her hands along the wall, and her fingers found the faint outline she'd noticed before. She pressed against the tiny stonemason's mark and let out a gasp of relief as the stone shifted. A section of the wall swung inward on concealed hinges, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. Nora squeezed through the narrow opening behind the false wall, the ancient stone mechanism grinding shut behind her with a final thud. The passage angled down 20 feet to a chamber carved from living rock. In the darkness, a weak beam of light shifted toward her. A man holding a small work light struggled to sit straighter against the stone wall, the beam revealing his gaunt face and sunken but alert eyes. "Janos," she said. "You found the mason's mark," he breathed, voice weak but clear. "Can you move?" Nora asked, crouching beside him. "They were draining me slowly before I got away," Janos said, touching his bandaged arm. "Mircea and Piotr didn't make it." Nora felt sick. 2 others she might have saved if she'd moved faster. "I barely escaped myself," he gestured weakly at his condition. "The passage to the river is long. I was gathering strength, waiting for full dark. We have to go. Now," she said. Her urgency infused him with a small burst of energy. "With some help I can make it," he groaned. "I know the way." Janos nodded toward a low opening in the chamber wall. "That passage leads to the old river gate. They kept me alive for this knowledge, and now we can use it against them." The tunnel followed geological veins older than the monastery above. Behind them, sounds of pursuit echoed through the shaft. The passage climbed steeply toward cold air carrying the scent of the river. There, Janos pointed ahead where their small light revealed a different quality of stonework. The outer foundation. They emerged through a hidden opening behind a screen of overgrown bushes beside the Maresh River. Dawn was breaking over the valley, painting the estate's towers in pale light. Nora helped Janos toward the access road. They kept to the road's foliage, circling back through the valley to where her rental car waited near the construction site. "Go quickly," Janos said as they reached the vehicle. "Tell them what you've learned. Those who will believe." "What about you?" "Don't worry," he said. "I know other hiding places in these hills. Places only the stones remember." Janos stepped back from the car. I don't matter, but you carry the warning now. Nora started the engine, her hands shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. She drove toward Brasov, checking her mirrors for pursuit that didn't come. After an hour, Nora pulled into a rest stop and killed the engine. A tiny, grateful smile traced her lips as she reached into the glove box to retrieve her backup phone, stashed before her arrival at the estate. Nora accessed the voice recorder app and began to speak. Case reference VE-2024, Nora Voss. The following statement concerns an imminent threat discovered at the Vaduva estate, Romania. Her voice was steady despite everything. An entity identifying itself as Field Marshal Radu has revealed a coordinated operation targeting 43 cities worldwide. The entity demonstrated supernatural capabilities including enhanced speed and strength, spatial repositioning, and apparent mind control over human subjects. Intelligence indicates global deployment planned within weeks, following decades of preparation since 1987. Systematic infiltration of corporate and infrastructure targets has been confirmed. Physical evidence secured includes a metallic artifact bearing an unknown script, available for specialist analysis. Nora paused, choosing her words carefully. Immediate escalation to appropriate authorities recommended. Entity represents an unprecedented national security threat. She pulled the pendant from her pocket, running her finger along the cold edge of the talisman, its strange script catching the morning light. She uploaded the recording to a secure agency server that would distribute it to her designated emergency contacts. Whether anyone would believe it was another question entirely. She started the car and drove off, moving through a world unaware of the danger growing beneath it. Nora Voss had become the bearer of impossible knowledge that would change everything forever. Behind her, in the rearview mirror, the Vaduva estate settled back into the shadow of patient silence, betraying nothing of the horror within. And so we return from the Carpathian shadows, my clever listeners, where Ms. Voss learned that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be traps. I'll grant you this. Nora's detective work was quite impressive. Methodical, thorough, rather professional, really. But here's her fundamental error, shared by so many of your species. She thought discovering the truth would give her power over it. Instead, poor Nora simply learned her true place in a much bigger game of vampiric ascension. Now then, my astute specimens, I'm curious about your own detective instincts. Did you spot the real threat before our clever investigator did? Or did you learn that the thing that makes you valuable also makes you a target? Share your thoughts below, and do subscribe if you haven't already. I so enjoy watching our collection grow. Farewell, my children of the night. Until next time, this is Nocturne saying, the field of your nightmares may be vast, but I guarantee every grain will be gathered.